All right, without any further delay, let me introduce our first session for the afternoon. We move into our next session on democratizing data analytics across business value chain. The ability for any business to use real-time data to drive effective analytics-based insights will give it a competitive edge now and in the future. If done well, it can help organizations in their innovation and transformation journey. But how can we make sure to democratize data collection and its interoperability across various departments within an organization? What role does cloud play in this journey, and what is the architecture needed? Well, this session will showcase some examples to share best practices and discuss some of these questions. I'd like to welcome our speakers. Joining us this afternoon is Kapil Mahajan, CIO, Allcargo. A brief introduction. Kapil is known for sharp technical and business acumen with expertise in building and executing strategic visions and technology roadmaps that work in alignment with business goals. He's a true digital platform leader and an early adopter of cloud analytics, mobile, social, and security across global clients. Joining him is Ramesh Lakshminarayanan, CIO, Group Head IT, HDFC Bank. Ramesh is responsible for technology strategy, strengthening foundational technology, enhancing the digital capabilities, and harnessing new age AI ML technology solutions for the bank. He brings an interesting blend of professional expertise as well as an entrepreneurial acumen acquired while running a startup. Joining them is Sreemoyee Ghosh, IT Head, Business Applications, Marico. Sreemoyee is a senior technology professional with over 14 years of experience in leading transformative and business-critical projects at FMCG major Marico, Unilever, and Procter & Gamble. She is passionate about nurturing talent in this journey to drive rapid growth, sustainable business practices, and inclusive work environments. Moderating the session is Nidhi Srivastava, Vice President and Global Head, Google Business Unit, Tata Consultancy Services. Nidhi has over 25 years of experience in delivering consulting solutions across industries. She leads TCS's Google Cloud Partnership, guiding companies to accelerate value from their cloud transformation initiatives and cultivating digital transformation of legacy business models. It's a pleasure to have you all join us for this afternoon session. I'm not going to take any more of your time. Over to you, Nidhi.
Thank you, Justin. So I'm going to host this really interesting discussion on data democratization today. And I'll go to my first panelist, Kapil Mahajan. So Kapil, welcome, and tell us a little bit about your organization and the context, especially when you think about data.
Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks, Nidhi. So about the organization, I represent a company called EQ and Allcargo Group. And as a part of our business, primarily business is about moving shipments. So we majorly do a lot of shipments, globally using some of the bigger shipping lines. And most of our revenue is kind of global, although we are a India-based MNC. Other than shipping, we also do a lot of express business in India. So with the recent acquisition of Gati that we did about over 2 years back, the objective was to stitch a end-to-end, door-to-door kind of a network for all our customers. So whether it's originating out of Europe or out of Americas and anywhere, including India, could be done through us, through a multimodal leg of movement. Right. So that's the overall the vision in terms of how we want to position ourselves in the market. I think a lot of the coming back to your question, Nidhi, around the data part of it, I think a lot of challenge that we have currently is because we have had these systems running in silos across different geographies. And as we acquired companies, a lot of the existing systems continue to persist. And over a period of time, we've been trying to put and push a common ERP implementation across all our global entities. But still, there are a lot of challenges with respect to regional nuances in terms of how compliances are handled or how custom paperwork is done, right? So there is no one solution that exists in the market. And the data currently is obviously resides and it's across different data centers, technically running about 6 data centers globally. And a lot of that data is kind of siloed in a way. There are certain DSMP regulations that prevent us from moving data from different countries, right? So that adds to another layer of complexity. I think the last few years and the going forward journey, Nidhi, is about stitching together a strategy that could, help us transform as a global leader in our space by kind of cutting down on all these nuances that we have with respect to multiple systems and data being spread out separately, and stitching a holistic solution across the board for the organization. So I think that's overall in terms of what we do and what we want to do going forward from a technology standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you look at data democratization, one of the big challenges is data being siloed, and you spoke very eloquently about your context and how you deal with that. I will come back to you in a bit, once we get a chance to meet the other panelists as well. And I'd like to get your perspective. Do you think the cloud in some ways is helping solve the challenges which go with data democratization?
Yeah, it surely is. I've been a big proponent of cloud. I think the last so I've been here for about close to little 4 months, but before that, for about 5 odd years, I was with with one of the organization Express Business, and I think the story there was how do we move from a paper-based and a lot of data-centric kind of workloads to a truly cloud-native company, right? And I think I always believe that cloud is never cheaper, right? So don't look at cloud for the cost. Look at cloud for the for the agility that it could add to your business. I think that needs to be the overall business use case. And from that point of view, moving the data to the cloud obviously reduces a lot of your manageability with respect to day-to-day operations and helps you structure your data in a much better way. And obviously, that was an Indian context, so we could, we had one source of data in terms of where it had to reside in India. So there were some challenges initially when we started that journey about 5.5 years back, that a lot of the big data centers of the big cloud providers were not hosted in India, right? So we had to kind of, look at a workaround of doing it. So we had to segregate PSI data, have the PSI reside here, and then, on the on-prem. So it was kind of a hybrid in a way. And then over a period of time, we moved it to the India data centers. But to me, that there is a very big story there, Nidhi. Right? If you're able to aggregate and move your data into a common platform, whether it's a data lake, whether it's or a set of data lakes, that's where you are able to then unlock a lot of potential of that data. Because I still believe about 90% of the data is dark, right? So we are not really mining it. We're not looking at it. It's just residing in the data centers. We're just paying for it, storing it for decades and decades. And now is the time, or actually it's been a time, a decade back, to start unlocking it. And the organizations that are doing it better are the ones who are leading the curve, right? So I think cloud definitely changing the game already. I think India was late. The organizations were late to start. Some of the bigger companies that I had worked with earlier, they have been using data in a way that could give them competitive edge. And now we have realized it. But I think that acceleration has really picked up. And the good part is we now have the talent pool in India to kind of support those journeys, because all of them require manpower and expertise, which probably a decade and a half back was not really accessible to the Indian customers. Most of the talent was pitched to the global clients, right? So I think that has changed with the entire government focus also moving towards cloud and the overall automation side of things.
Okay, so probably this is a good segue for me to go over to our next panelist, Ramesh. Welcome. So when we look at the banking sector, banks have been early adopters of digital. And one of the challenges that we see when you look at or unpeel the onion around data democratization is the fact that data still remains in the hands of a few experts who know the tools, who have specific skills. So this whole notion of ubiquity of data, meaning, and especially data access, comes up for a knot. And so my question to you is, how have in your experience made it easy for users to access the right data in a self-service manner?
Thanks for having me here on this panel. The challenge is, it's across the industry. It's not just banking industry. I mean, for ages together, if you look back, the way we manage data, it's also to do with the legacy thought process, right? I mean, initially, data was largely centralized. The tech teams would largely build the data warehouses, the data marts, and then the plumbing, the engineering, the reporting, and everything would be actually sitting with the technology teams. And then some part of the domain guys would walk over to the technology team, match up the reports, and then every day some reports will get spit out, and that's how the model worked, right? I mean, for ages together. But that was fundamentally a flawed model, because the data is as good as the domain. To me, I think domain and data are so interlinked, that you can't tell a fraud management guy that I can only give you 4 columns of report. He just needs to figure out what patterns he's seeing across the gamut of the data points, right? So I think clearly, and similarly with the marketing guy or the risk guy, and they were always kind of told, if you pull out a report, you ask for more data, the resources will go, and that's how the centralized technology teams worked, I think, and that was like I said, a flawed model. So we kind of realized that, I've been in the bank for now 2.5 years roughly, and what we set out to do is, we first understood the landscape. So largely, it was similar in that sense that we had a large data warehouse built on an earlier generation columnar platform. And everybody would kind of pull up from that, and the reporting engines be classical reporting engines, which will give you, okay, this many number of reports and this many of data points. And to the daily struggle, right? Whether it's kind of reports coming on time, whether you need ad hoc data, whether you need data in a better represented way, whether you want to play around it for higher analytics, for AI/ML kind of work, everything used to be a struggle, and that was the reality. So what we first realized is, in fact, the first thing that we did was to start looking at the option of taking what you call the weight of data generation and the kind of restrictions that you place. And cloud was a very logical way of moving, because one of the key theories that come around this is, like I said, in terms of the size and the scale of the data. When you run huge data workloads, whether those computes are available. So what we did is we started a movement of our entire data warehouse. In fact, we had one large data warehouse, and then we had multiple smaller data warehouses, given the size of the bank that we were operating. Multiple departments hooking on to some of the centralized warehouses, somebody using some other kind of a smaller data warehouse. What we did was we first actually started looking at moving the workload to cloud. So we started a project. In fact, we kind of worked very closely with Azure actually out here. And we basically, we started kind of creating what we'd call as a centralized data lake. But one of the things that we clearly looked at philosophically is that how do we create federated data models? We did not want to go down the route of saying for any requirement, user requirement, that would come back to the technology, whatever it is. In fact, that was a fundamental principle. We said, the availability of the data should be so ubiquitous that at no point of time the user group should come back to the centralized technology team. That was like a philosophy of project. We call this project as Sangam actually. It's an interesting one because we kind of started putting together all the existing warehouses, and they were all kind of converging into a lake, and that's why we call this project as Sangam. And then what we started doing is that, and we also then started looking at the choice of the technology, multiple items. So it's not just that you put your data lake and then let's say you run out of an existing cloud database. That's not good enough. We really had to look through a lot of new age technology platforms. I cover that in depth as we go along, but largely what we started looking at is ability to have SQL data, NoSQL streaming. We also wanted our entire data science. We have a large data science practice given a large bank, especially in the fraud management and marketing areas, to start hooking on to the models on the go, actually. So whether they're creating something in Python or they're kind of looking at an R-based model, some of them could be even legacy models that could be even MATLABs, and they run. I mean, and a lot of those things have to be kind of plowed back and put into something that can be very easily created. So what we did is, now in the new structure, every single department had a very defined data mart. The technology team only plumbs it out, actually. So we only kind of do the plumbing and the engineering activities to put the data in the form and shape that the businesses need. And then we've given a lot of freedom for the businesses to start. So whether it's reporting through Power BI, or then we've also looked at a lot of, like I said, machine learning models to be attached. A lot of models can be on the go, and because it's cloud compute, we were easily able to provide, whether it's GPU-based computing and stuff like that, we were able to easily kind of offload. So today what happens is, and the project is still not complete because it's like almost a 2-year long project, but department by department, we started moving into this kind of structure, and we're seeing the powerful benefits actually today. So we're not seeing our users coming back for reports, slice and dices on the go. Like I said, AI, ML is on the go. And then where we want to go with is that even for those departments, we look at API, the data hooks onto the API. So for their own external consumptions, if the APIs have to be kind of consumed, and they want to attach a data point to that, that should be something that should be really readily and quickly doable, because that's where the world is going. So every time you deliver an API payload, it has to be backed up by a data insight, right? So that's how, so all of the hooks onto this lake from an API perspective is also kind of predefined, and we're using some new cool technologies out there to do all of that stuff, But at a larger level, I think like the philosophy has shifted from a centralized management to a federated model, and the technology teams are only facilitating the data architecture and the data engineering. Beyond that, the data usage and the data, demand and complete data, profitability is now lies with the operating units, actually. So that's how the entire system is built now.
Okay, very nice. Very good. Very insightful, Ramesh. Thank you. Okay, and so now I will move over to welcoming Sreemoyee Ghosh Dastidar. Welcome, Sreemoyee from Marico. Good to have you on the panel. And so far, we have looked at two elements, or one is the challenge of data being siloed, and then the second one is that without the right skills and training, how do people really access data? So how do you make the shift to a self-serve mode? Now I want to uncover the third aspect of organizational culture and its linkage to data democratization. Most organizations, I would say, do not encourage sharing, and especially data sharing, as an element of how people work. People are organized by functions, by departments, and everybody focuses on the goals and objectives with respect to their focus area. So how do you build a new age culture that focuses on sharing data and using it for better collaboration and decision making?
Yeah, so at Marico, we are a CPG company and we manufacture household brands like Parachute and Sapola. So our business is a lot manufacturing focused, and essentially the way we run our business is that we have common goals across functions. So our goal sheets look like, my goal sheet, I'm an IT person, would have a sales goal, a marketing goal, so that as an organization, we're all running in the same direction. So what we have consciously focused on in the last 12 to 18 months is to get the data all together in a data warehouse and focusing on the data visualization there. So we have built like control towers across functions. So there's a supply chain control tower, yeah, which essentially tracks, what is my customer's fill rate, and going backwards, tracking up to manufacturing and procurement, what are the reasons, which are causing that fill rate to go up and go down, and the alerts which come to specific people across functions who need to take actions. So we've built control towers in various functions, like a supply chain control tower. We're rolling out a sales control tower, and the focus is that, there are alerts, and there is a state of business which is prepared in a dashboard manner, which can be drilled down, and the system is suggesting decisions. So it is augmenting a decision that a human being can take. So that's what we focused on in terms of budget.
Very interesting and very insightful. So, so now I'll come back to you, Kapil, what I want to hear is your perspective on data governance, because data governance goes hand in hand with data democratization. So, can you share some best practices from your context?
Okay, so I'll try to share with you, Nidhi, based on my previous experience, because this is still new, and I think a lot of that work has to be done, the legwork for that. But I believe there are probably 4 to 5 key best practices when you're looking at data governance overall, right? And as data is getting more pervasive, it's really important, and then a lot of the organizations probably would have few of these pillars already in place, and some would be kind of moving towards that. I think one of the important ones would be the accountability, right? So that to me is of utmost importance. So ownership and accountability, that needs to be applied across the organization. And to me, data governance and data today is not a private property or a problem of the IT department, right? So there were times when IT would own it and drive it, right? And back in the days. And so I've seen companies where, what we just discussed about, self-service BI and things like that. Now, to me, those are journeys, right? If I do a self-service BI in a company that's not at a stage where it can ingest, it'll add more problems to the business, right? Because then you'll have 10 people creating a report in 10 different ways and then debating the numbers that are coming out of it, right? So when you move to self-service kind of a platform, and we did that for Prudential Group Insurance in New Jersey back in the days, it was really important that we identified the entire data governance strategy, right? In terms of who are the right people in business who could own it. So if I'm talking about an actuary using a data, then who is the person who will mine that data? We would not know the complexities on how an underwriting is done. Now, these guys would understand the business, but they'll understand IT in a lot of areas deeper than my own guys, right? Because some of them would be PhDs who would understand data at a level where they could write a complex query and get the data out of the data mart, right? So they would. So to me, that was a very evolving and a very mature practice where that self-service works, right? And every business function or domain has these expertise on the business side that's driving and making sure that the experience and the data that's coming out, the currency of that data is viable in terms of it being standard across the board, no matter how you look at it or how you slice and dice it, right? So accountability to me is really important. So having a data governance council and then representation from all the departments, right? So that's important. Who owns what MDMs or what master data is? That's really important. Second is your standardization rules and regulations as a best practice. So I believe any successful data governance, you will need to define and abide by certain standard rules and regulations to protect your data, and also to ensure that it's kind of in accordance with all the relevant external regulations, whether it's GDPR or anything else, right? India, we still yet to see that. So all these standard rules and regulations will define the guidelines for all your other aspects of data usage, right? Which will be established at a data governance council level and then enforced by the data stewards. So it's kind of setting up that whole practice of having data stewards, having a council, having a process around managing it, right? Then comes your entire data stewardship itself. Do you have those kind of people in the organization? If not, as a best practice, I would say that you have to induct such people. because that ownership needs to reside with the business other than just the IT. I think so that's an important pillar. Also your data quality standards, right? So other than the standardization rules and regulations, what are the quality standards? How are you defining data quality, right? So for example, in order to make an intelligent, effective business decision, it is really crucial for, I believe, the individuals or stakeholders to be able to draw upon high quality, trustworthy data. And defining a common set of, say, data quality standards is from that point of view really critical, right? So this is my gold mine. This is my, data that's really kind of validated, and whatever is the inference that's coming out of it, I could make those bold business decisions. A lot of that would kind of, really be governed by the quality of data. If the quality is bad over a period of time, business trust keeps going down, and then the decision making, based on data, just becomes like a fad, right, in the organization. So I think that is a continuously evolving process that needs to be there. And I think lastly, it's the transparency, right? So I would say, all the data governance processes which are implemented throughout the organization have to kind of have utmost transparency. Now, that transparency could mean that can I trace a data change from the entry into the system to the final sunset of that data point, right? So whether we look at a blockchain or some technology where there are certain audit controls in place, every data commit that happens or an update can be traced back to the user. So to me, that is that transparency side of the data, and that's really important because it's easier said than done. Doing that at a massive scale itself is a lot of effort, and if you don't have practices and standards in place, it becomes really tedious, and cannot be really democratized, if I may, right? You'll probably focus more on the customer data, but then forget about some of the other slowly changing dimensions that you might have in the system. So I think all these 5: accountability, standardization of rules and regulations, data stewardship, data quality standards, and the transparency would kind of be some of the key best practices that you should have across all these 5 pillars, Nidhi.
Okay. Very, very, very good. Very good. So, Ramesh, if we take a slightly different angle here, most organizations, and especially banks, I will say, have a lot of legacy data. So, my question to you is, are there any specific approaches or tools that you would like to recommend to our audience over here in terms of how do you tame your legacy?
So Nidhi, there is no magic bullet. Let's be clear about it, because frankly, your data is as good as the quality of the data. Tools are there to kind of merely help you out. They can't solve for some of the fundamental problems, right? I think if you see banking system, like as I said, first of all, the biggest issue has been the diversity of the systems, right? There are more than 200 to 50 systems in a large bank. Pulling that data centralized into a warehouse, then the accuracy of that, the daily rigor around the ETLs and all of that stuff. Unfortunately, some of those the grunt work has to be done. That cannot be changed because the structure of the architecture fundamentally, is built like that. So you have to do the grunt work of pulling the data every day and then kind of pushing it into a centralized area. But what is also happening at the same time is some of the areas where things have moved very well, I would say, areas like banks being able to run data off the memory. For example, Spark engines have helped quite a lot today. So if you look at it, a lot of our match in memory data, looking at SQL and non-SQL together across the clusters, at a scale is fairly, I would say, problem that's been solved for. Earlier, we had difficulties in solving this kind of problem. The compute was clearly a problem. And then mixing up the data at a cache level across 2 different disparate sources of data was a challenge. A lot of that has now, like I said, for example, we've adopted Spark and Databricks as a very foundational platform. Then, of course, this whole thing on data virtualization, so there is now this whole concept of virtualized data where you could kind of pull up disparate data in a layer that's not sitting in a core database. So Excel sheets, or data that are sitting outside of the ecosystem, not on a daily basis coming through. those could be actually virtualized. There are some very nice platforms like Denodo and stuff like that, which you can use to kind of create a single view actually, and on the go. You don't really need to kind of do the relationship plumbing kind of stuff. Then, like Kapil mentioned, a lot of work has happened on data lineage and type 2 dimensioning and models that support that. These are things earlier we used to do a lot of work to get to that kind of a data model. Those are available today on the go. So some of these areas are clearly, very, very interesting. And what's also happening in the cloud service providers are getting far better at it. Even, if you look at it today, there are multi-cloud data pool pipes available, single view kind of, data across three zones or 3 different cloud providers also available. So I think some of those tools are coming up very interestingly. And I think probably what's solved for is compute for sure. Then the mixing of SQL and NoSQL has happened quite nicely, if you ask me. In that sense, data virtualization has come through. I think now what will more and more happen is your seamless movement and seamless view of the data across multiple clouds, because that's also going to happen as more and more workloads get shifted to the cloud, and disparate clouds. So that is the fourth part that will happen. So I think these are some of the interesting, I would say, platforms, tools that are coming through. And as we see more and more migration to cloud, I think more and more such tools will help us. But it's not going to solve for the fundamental problem of data quality and the data engineering. I think that will continue to kind of one will have to do all the hard work. I haven't seen any organization which is coming to us and said we don't have to do that. So I think so it's a mix in that sense. There's no silver bullet to my mind.
That's correct. I wish there were silver bullets, but there aren't. So with that, I'll come to you, Sreemoyee. And my question to you is, one of the characteristics of digital is self-serve. And so could you share best practices or your insight or a perspective on empowering users with self-serve analytics?
Yeah. So what we figured out at Marico, Nidhi, is that there are certain set of data which is probably used by a large cross-section of our users. Yeah, it could be, for example, our sales data. So how much are we selling on a day-to-day basis? How are our new launch SKUs doing in the market? Which are our channels which are performing, which are not performing? Or, how are our ad spends doing in terms of effectiveness? So there are certain areas or sections of data which we have figured out cater to a wide range of our audience, and we have allowed that data to be available to our users in terms of Power BI or Tableau tools, so that they can use that data and harness it and slice and dice it as per the KPIs that they're responsible for. So these are essentially around sales and marketing data. And while we are working more and more towards self-service, what we are, like I talked before, working actively on is enabling the virtualization bit of the data. So while we realize that having got our data in a data warehouse in one place together, what is the next level that we need to enable is how do we harness this data? Yeah, how do we enable it to be available to the audience in a timely manner, in a relevant manner? Yeah, so that is what our focus is on in terms of data. And what we're trying to do is speaking actively with our different functions and trying to understand that how we can do that in terms of achieving key KPIs like cutting the time to market, meaning time to launch a new SKU, because our industry is more about you have to be there available on the shelf, whether digital or physical, at the time when your consumer is seeking you. So for us, that timing and availability is of essence.
Great. So I think I have really enjoyed this conversation and each of your unique perspectives. We've looked at the challenges of data silos, skills and training for people to be able to access and consume the data, and then the culture, organizational cultural nuances that allow people to share data and use it for better informed decision making. We also looked into the complications that go with legacy of data, and also how data governance and thinking self-serve, especially in analytics, helps us make this big and bold change of data-driven enterprises. Because it's my hypothesis that every business will be a data business, and every business will also be an AI business in time to come. So with that, I would like to wrap up our panel discussion today. Thank you very much for joining us. And with that, I will hand it over back to you, Justin.
Well, thank you, Sreemoyee, Ramesh, and Kapil for such a wonderful deliberation. And thank you, of course, Nidhi, for chairing the leaders' discussion efficiently.